The receipt fluttered from my trembling hands onto our kitchen island. Marriott Marquis, San Francisco. Room 1842. 2 nights. The bill clearly showed my name, Sarah Mitchell, except I had never been to San Francisco that weekend. I had been right here in Boston, sleeping alone in the bed we'd shared for 12 years, while David was supposedly at a regional sales conference in Chicago. "You're overreacting," he said with a dismissive wave, not even bothering to look at the evidence. His steel blue eyes, the same eyes that had once made me weak at the knees when we first met at Princeton, now refused to meet mine. It's clearly some kind of mistake. The rage that surged through my body wasn't familiar. I'd always been the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the good wife who managed the household and raised our twins while maintaining my part-time position at the architectural firm. I was the one who made excuses when he missed parent-teacher conferences, who smiled through clenched teeth at dinner parties when he interrupted me, who pretended not to notice the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume. A mistake? My voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the kitchen like shattered glass. They made a mistake and randomly used my name? My credit card? For a hotel in a city you weren't even supposed to be in? David sighed dramatically, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, the hair that had once been thick and dark when we exchanged vows on that summer day in the Hamptons. Now at 45, the distinguished gray at his temples matched the growing coldness in his eyes. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Yes, a mistake. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to book a hotel room in your name if I was doing something wrong? His voice rose with practiced indignation. I'd seen this performance before, at dinner parties when challenged on his facts, with colleagues who questioned his decisions, with our children when they caught him in broken promises. But something inside me had finally snapped. After years of swallowing doubts, of making myself smaller to accommodate his expanding ego, of believing the carefully constructed lies, I finally saw the truth reflected in the glossy paper of that hotel receipt. I placed my palms flat on the cool marble countertop, steadying myself. Our kitchen, my kitchen, with its pristine white cabinets and stainless steel appliances that I'd selected when we renovated 3 years ago, suddenly felt like a stage set. A beautiful, expensive facade hiding the rot beneath. "Who is she?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "There is no she, Sarah. You're being ridiculous." He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, the hand-painted ceramic bowl our daughter Emma had made in 5th grade. "I don't have time for this. I have a meeting with the Johnson account in 30 minutes. The morning light streamed through our bay windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Outside, the maple trees on our street were just beginning to turn golden. Another New England fall arriving right on schedule. Everything in its right place, except for the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. "Don't you dare walk out that door." The steel in my voice made him pause, his hand on the doorknob. In 12 years of marriage, I had never spoken to him like that. He turned slowly, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else. Fear, perhaps? Had he finally recognized that the woman standing before him wasn't the same one who had stood by silently all these years? "You used my name, my credit card." I picked up the hotel bill again, holding it up like evidence in a courtroom. "And the only reason you would do something that reckless is if you were with someone who couldn't use their own name, someone who would be recognized, someone whose presence in a hotel with you would matter." A muscle twitched in his jaw, the tell he had when bluffing at poker nights with his colleagues from Brennan and Associates, the same tell I'd noticed for years, but pretended not to see, just as I'd pretended not to see so many things. "Is it Jessica?" I asked, thinking of his young assistant with the Harvard MBA and perfect blowout. "Or Meredith from marketing?" The words tumbled out now, years of suspicions crystallizing in the morning light. "Or is it Elise Carter, your client's wife?" His face drained of color at the last name, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Elise Carter, the elegant, polished wife of Richard Carter, whose shipping company was David's biggest client, the woman who had complimented my earrings at the company Christmas party, while her hand lingered a moment too long on my husband's arm. "You don't know what you're talking about," he whispered, but the damage was done. The truth hung between us in our perfect kitchen, in our perfect house, in our supposedly perfect marriage. "Get out," I said quietly. "Pack a bag and get out." He didn't move, stunned by this unfamiliar version of his wife. "Sarah, you can't just—" I said, "Get out!" The scream tore from my throat, primal and raw. releasing 12 years of silent suffering in a single breath. A photo frame on the wall rattled. Get out before I call Richard Carter myself and tell him exactly why his wife was in a San Francisco hotel room with my name on the bill. My name is Sarah Mitchell. At 43, I had constructed what appeared to be an enviable life in Brookline, Massachusetts. A charming colonial revival house on a tree-lined street. Twin teenagers who excelled in school despite their occasional attitude. And a part-time position at Linden and Brook Architecture that allowed me to keep my skills sharp while managing our family life. My husband, David, was the breadwinner, a senior partner at Brennan & Associates Financial Advisors, with an office overlooking Boston Harbor and clients who trusted him with millions. That was yesterday. Today, I'm a woman staring at hotel receipts and credit card statements spread across our kitchen island, trying to piece together the extent of my husband's betrayal. After David left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the antique mirror in our foyer, I sank to the kitchen floor, my back against the refrigerator where Emma's soccer schedule and Ethan's debate team calendar were held in place by souvenir magnets from family vacations. Trips to Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Cape Cod. Had those moments been real? Had any of it been real? My chest constricted as I struggled to breathe. 12 years. 12 years of marriage after 3 years of dating. 15 years of my life dedicated to a man who had casually used my name to conduct his affair. The humiliation burned worse than the betrayal. I don't know how long I sat there, but the sound of the mail slot flapping brought me back to the present. Bills, appointments, the mundane mechanics of a life that had to continue despite personal collapse. With trembling legs, I stood and walked to the entryway. Among the catalogs and utility bills was an envelope from Pearson Day School, the private academy where Emma and Ethan were juniors, the quarterly tuition statement, $28,000 due by the end of the month. Reality crashed back with stunning clarity. I couldn't afford to fall apart, not with two 16-year-olds depending on me. The twins were spending the weekend at my sister Jen's place in Providence. A small mercy. They wouldn't have to witness this initial earthquake, though the aftershocks would inevitably reach them. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, a space I had redecorated just last year, with a soothing palette of blues and creams. An attempt to create a sanctuary from David's increasingly frequent late nights at the office. Now the king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets looked like a monument to my naivete. In the walk-in closet, David's precisely organized section, suits arranged by color, ties on custom racks, mocked me with its pristine order. How had I not recognized this pathological need for control as a red flag? The man couldn't bear a wrinkle in his pocket square, yet he'd casually wrinkled our entire life. I pulled out my phone and called the one person who had never judged me. "Jen, it's me." My voice cracked. "I need you to keep the kids until tomorrow." Yes, he did. I sank onto the upholstered bench in the center of the closet. Worse than we thought. After promising to explain everything when she brought the twins home tomorrow, I ended the call and opened my laptop. First, I checked our joint accounts. The primary checking account, savings, the kids' college funds. Everything seemed intact. Next, I logged into our credit card accounts. The Marriott charge wasn't isolated. There were dozens of suspicious transactions over the past 8 months. Jewelry stores I'd received nothing from, restaurants in cities where David was supposedly alone on business, wine shops charging bottles far more expensive than whatever appeared in our cellar. I was not just a betrayed wife. I was financial collateral damage. The irony wasn't lost on me. The wife of a financial advisor, dutifully managing the household budget, clipping digital coupons and waiting for sales, while my husband spent thousands on another woman. I'd maintained my part-time schedule at the architecture firm, to be available for the kids, to be the parent who never missed a game or recital, while David built his career. My choice. He'd always been quick to remind me when I expressed occasional restlessness, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to put my own ambitions on hold. I graduated second in my class from Rhode Island School of Design. I had been recruited by 3 firms before I'd even completed my master's. And then I met David at a gallery opening in Boston. Charming, ambitious David, who said all the right things about supporting my career, even as he slowly, subtly convinced me that our family needed one of us to prioritize home. Just until the kids were older, of course. The twins were 16 now. How much older did they need to be? The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the bedroom as I methodically went through credit card statements, bank records, Even our cell phone bill, logging every suspicious charge, every late-night call to the same number, building a paper trail of deceit. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "This is insane. I'm staying at the Westin tonight. We'll talk tomorrow when you've calmed down." Calmed down. As if my reaction to his betrayal was the problem. I thought about calling Emma and Ethan, hearing their voices, reminding myself of what was real and valuable in my life. But what would I say? How do you tell your children that their foundation is cracking? Instead, I texted them both separately. Casual messages asking about their day with Aunt Jen, telling them I loved them, that I was looking forward to seeing them tomorrow. Normal messages from a mother whose world hadn't just imploded. As evening settled around the house, I wandered from room to room, seeing our home with new eyes. The formal living room we rarely used. The family room where we'd watched movies together. Emma and Ethan growing from toddlers to teens on that sectional sofa. The dining room where I'd hosted countless dinner parties for David's clients and colleagues, playing the role of the perfect corporate wife, while my architecture designs gathered dust in portfolios. I paused at the kitchen counter, where my phone lit up with another text. Not David this time, but Nicole, my closest friend since college. "Ladies' night still on for tomorrow? You've been MIA lately. Need some wine and gossip therapy. Ladies' night, the monthly gathering where my friends, most of them working full-time and demanding careers, would unwind and share stories." How many times had I downplayed my frustrations about David, not wanting to shatter the image of our perfect marriage? How many times had I smiled through their well-intentioned questions about when I'd return to full-time design work? I picked up the hotel bill again, the paper now soft from being handled. The truth was right there in black and white. Room 1842, Marriott Marquis, San Francisco, Sarah Mitchell. Tomorrow the twins would come home. Tomorrow David would expect me to listen to excuses, explanations, promises to change. Tomorrow I would have to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be for the next chapter of my life. But tonight, alone in this house that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a beautifully designed prison, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my rage. And beneath the anger, something unexpected stirred. A whisper of relief. The exhausting charade was over. The truth, however painful, was finally in the open. Sunday morning arrived with relentless sunshine streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close the blinds on. I'd spent the night in the guest room, unable to face our marriage bed. My phone showed 6 missed calls from David and a text that read, "Coming home at 11. We need to talk." The doorbell rang at 10:30. Not David, he had keys, but Jen, returning earlier than expected with Emma and Ethan. I quickly splashed water on my face and pinched color into my cheeks before heading downstairs. "Mom?" Emma's voice called out as I descended the stairs. At 16, she was a willowy version of me, with the same dark hair and hazel eyes, but she had David's confidence, his easy way with people. "Why is Dad's car not here, and why aren't you answering your phone?" I froze on the landing. I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared what to say. Ethan appeared in the foyer, his lanky frame leaning against the wall, headphones around his neck. More reserved than his twin, he noticed things others missed. His eyes, so much like David's it sometimes hurt to look at him, narrowed as he studied my face. "What happened?" he asked simply. Jen stood behind them, her expression apologetic. "They kept asking questions I couldn't answer," she explained. And I thought, maybe it's better if they're here when you two talk. Before I could respond, the front door opened. David walked in, impeccably dressed in casual Sunday clothes, dark jeans and a light blue button-down that matched his eyes. He'd always been handsome in that polished corporate way, but now I saw the calculation behind his appearance. This wasn't the rumpled walk of shame I'd half expected. He'd prepared for this entrance. "Dad!" Emma moved toward him for a hug, while Ethan stayed rooted in place, looking between us. "Hey, sweetheart." David embraced our daughter, then nodded at Ethan. "Son." His eyes found mine. "Sarah, I think we should talk privately." "Yeah, what's going on?" Emma asked. "Mom looks like she hasn't slept, and you weren't home last night." "Nothing for you to worry about," David assured her with practiced ease. "Just some adult things we need to work through. They deserve to know," I said quietly. David's jaw tightened. "This isn't the time or place. When is it ever the right time to tell your children their father has been cheating?" The words escaped before I could filter them, hanging in the air like shattered glass. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. What? Ethan's expression hardened, his eyes fixed on his father. Sarah, for God's sake. David's voice dripped with disappointment, the tone he used when he thought I'd embarrassed him at company functions. Jen stepped forward. Kids, maybe we should go get some breakfast while your parents— No, Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. I want to hear this. I took a deep breath. Your father has been having an affair. I found evidence yesterday. Hotel receipts in my name, charges I never made. David's face flushed with anger. This is not how we should be handling this. Emma, Ethan, your mother is upset and jumping to conclusions. Don't. I cut him off. Don't you dare gaslight me in front of our children. Show them the same respect you couldn't show me. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Dad, is it true? The moment stretched between us. 5 people in a foyer designed for gracious welcomes, now hosting the collapse of our family. David exhaled slowly. It's complicated. It's actually very simple, I said. Your father has been having an affair with Elise Carter, Richard Carter's wife. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Your biggest client's wife? Are you serious? David ran a hand through his hair. This is a private matter between your mother and me. We shouldn't be dragging you into adult problems. We're not children, Ethan shot back. And we live here too. We deserve to know if our family is falling apart. Emma started crying in earnest now. I can't believe this is happening. Everything was fine. Was it? I asked gently. Or were we all just pretending? Jen placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. I really think I should take the kids somewhere while you two talk. Please, David agreed quickly. No, I said firmly. They're old enough to understand the truth, and I won't have them wondering what they did wrong. I turned to the twins. This has nothing to do with either of you. This is about your father's choices. David's expression darkened. And your mother's choice to handle it like this instead of discussing it privately. Like you discussed using my credit cards privately? I shot back. Or booking hotel rooms in my name. Emma looked between us, confusion mixing with her tears. What do you mean, in your name? I hesitated, realizing I'd said too much. The children didn't need every sordid detail, but David saw his opening. Your mother found some confusing credit card charges and immediately assumed the worst instead of asking me about them. There are reasonable explanations for everything. Then explain, Ethan challenged, crossing his arms. David glanced at his watch, a tell I now recognized. He was stalling, calculating. This really isn't the appropriate— He used my name and credit card to book hotel rooms where he met Elise, I said flatly. San Francisco, Chicago, New York. Cities where he was supposedly on business trips. Some of the same trips where he missed your debate championships, Ethan. Your orchestra concerts, Emma. The twins exchanged a glance I couldn't quite read. A silent communication they'd perfected since childhood. How long? Ethan asked, addressing his father directly. David's shoulders sagged slightly. It's not what your mother is making it out to be. How? Long, Ethan repeated, each word distinct. 8 months, I answered when David remained silent. At least that's how far back the credit card charges go. Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Is that why you've been working so many late nights? Missing dinner? Those weekend conferences? David moved toward the kitchen. I need a drink. It's 11 in the morning, Jen pointed out. And I'm being ambushed in my own home, David snapped. So, yes, I'd say a drink is warranted. I followed him into the kitchen, the others trailing behind. David poured himself a generous whiskey, not offering anyone else a glass. The morning light reflected off the amber liquid as he took a long sip. Where did you stay last night? Emma asked in a small voice. The Westin downtown, David answered. I needed space to think. You needed space? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. That's rich. Ethan leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. So what happens now? David set down his glass. Now, your mother and I discuss this privately, like adults, and figure out the next steps without dragging our children into the middle of it. We're already in the middle of it, Emma protested. You put us here. Emma, sweetheart. David's voice softened. Marriages are complicated. Things happen between adults that— Don't patronize her, I interrupted. And don't minimize what you did as things happening. You made deliberate choices, over and over again. David's eyes hardened. And you're making a choice right now to destroy our family instead of working through this. The breathtaking audacity of his statement silenced the room. He was twisting this, spinning the narrative to make me the villain. It was so familiar, this subtle manipulation, that I almost fell into the old pattern of doubting myself. Almost. "I'm not destroying anything," I said quietly. "I'm finally acknowledging what's already broken." Jen stepped forward. "David, I think you should leave again. Give everyone some space to process. This is my house," he said coldly. "I'm not going anywhere." "Actually," I countered, "this house is in both our names, and since you've been enjoying other accommodations lately, perhaps you should continue that arrangement." Emma looked at me with wide eyes, as if seeing a stranger. In many ways, she was. The mother she knew would never have spoken to her father this way, would never have stood her ground instead of smoothing things over. "Mom," she whispered, "do you want a divorce?" The question hung in the air, direct and unavoidable. The word I'd been circling since yesterday morning finally spoken aloud. Before I could answer, David set down his glass with a sharp click against the marble. "Your mother is upset and saying things she doesn't mean. Once we've had time to talk privately, I'm sure we can work through this. Families go through hard times. We'll get through this too." His confidence was breathtaking, as if my discovery was merely a speed bump on the road he'd already mapped out for us. He truly believed he could manage this situation, just as he managed difficult clients or market downturns. "Emma, Ethan," I said, looking directly at my children, "I don't know what happens next, but I do know that I won't pretend anymore. I won't model for you that it's okay to accept betrayal and disrespect, even from someone you love." Emma's tears had stopped, replaced by a stunned silence. Ethan nodded almost imperceptibly. David drained his glass. "This performance is impressive, Sarah. I didn't know you had it in you." The casual cruelty of his dismissal, reducing my authentic pain to a performance, made something snap inside me. "Get out," I said for the second time in 24 hours. "Pack what you need and get out. Your lawyer can contact mine about arranging times to collect the rest of your things." "My lawyer?" David laughed incredulously. "You don't even have a lawyer." "I will by tomorrow." We stared at each other across the kitchen island, the same space where, just yesterday morning, my world had shattered with a hotel receipt. His expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty as he realized I wasn't backing down. "Kids," he said, not taking his eyes off me. "Go upstairs for a bit while your mother and I sort this out." "No," Ethan said firmly. "We're not kids anymore, Dad. And Mom's right. You should go." David blinked, genuinely surprised by his son's stance. Emma remained silent, her allegiance unclear. "This family discussion is over," I said quietly. "Jen, would you mind taking Emma and Ethan out for a while? I need to speak with David alone." Jen nodded, relief evident on her face. "Come on, kids. Let's get some air." After they reluctantly filed out, the front door closing behind them, David and I stood in charged silence. "Happy now?" he finally asked. "You've turned our children against me." "No, David. You did that all on your own." After David left, this time with a suitcase and a promise to call his brother in Wellesley, the house fell into a hollow silence that echoed with memories. I wandered into Emma's bedroom, where photographs in pastel frames documented our family history like artifacts from a lost civilization. There we were on the beach in Cape Cod, the twins building a sandcastle, while David and I smiled with sunburned noses. Emma couldn't have been more than 5, her front tooth missing, Ethan's arm protectively around her shoulders. There was our trip to the Grand Canyon, the 4 of us squinting into the sun, the vastness of the landscape dwarfing our family unit. Christmas mornings, first days of school, moments that had seemed permanent, unbreakable. I picked up a silver-framed photo from Emma's nightstand, David carrying her on his shoulders at a Red Sox game, her tiny hands gripping his forehead, both of them laughing. The sight of them so happy, so connected, sent a pang through my chest. Whatever his failings as a husband, he loved his children. That much I believed. The reality of what divorce would mean for Emma and Ethan hit me with fresh clarity. Their world would fracture in ways I couldn't fully anticipate. Holidays divided. Separate parent-teacher conferences. The complicated choreography of shared custody that would force them to shuttle between households until they left for college in less than 2 years. I sank onto Emma's bed, surrounded by the pastel colors and memorabilia of her childhood. Dance trophies, honor roll certificates, playbills from school productions. Had I done the right thing by confronting David in front of the twins? Or should I have protected them longer, dealt with this privately. The doubt crept in, familiar and insidious. My phone buzzed with a text from Jen. Taking the kids to that pasta place they like. Back around 3. You okay? I texted back a quick thanks, not answering her question because I didn't have an answer. Was I okay? Would I ever be okay again? Moving to Ethan's room across the hall, I was struck by how much tidier it was than the typical teenage boy's domain. His books were arranged by subject on wooden shelves David had installed when Ethan was 10. His laptop closed neatly on a desk that held framed photos of the debate team and robotics club. He was so much like his father in his precision, his attention to detail, yet so different in his quiet integrity. I opened Ethan's closet, looking for a spare phone charger, and found myself face to face with a stack of storage boxes labeled in my neat handwriting. Ethan, elementary, middle school awards, summer camp. Pulling down the elementary school box, I lifted the lid to find construction paper art, certificates for perfect attendance, a tiny clay handprint pressed into a disc painted blue. Beneath these mementos was a manila folder labeled Family History Project, 4th grade. I opened it to find a family tree Ethan had constructed, complete with photographs of grandparents and great-grandparents glued carefully to the appropriate branches. At the bottom was a handwritten essay titled, How My Parents Met. In Ethan's careful 4th grade handwriting, our origin story unfolded. My mom was an architect who designed beautiful buildings. My dad worked with money at a big company. They met at an art show in Boston. Mom was looking at a painting of the ocean, and Dad said it reminded him of her eyes. Mom thought that was silly because her eyes are green-brown, not blue. But Dad said sometimes the ocean looks green too. I smiled through sudden tears at the innocent retelling. David had been so charming that night, so attentive. I had been 27, my career just beginning to gain momentum after my master's program. He was 30, already established at Brennan and Associates, confident in a way that I found both intimidating and magnetic. Tucked behind the essay was a photograph I'd forgotten existed, David and me on the steps of the courthouse after our civil ceremony, 3 months before the formal wedding in the Hamptons. We'd been impatient to make it official, too in love to wait for the big event our families expected. In the photo, I wore a simple cream-colored dress, my dark hair loose around my shoulders. David was looking at me instead of the camera, his expression so nakedly adoring it made my chest ache to see it now. What had happened to that man? When had he stopped looking at me that way? I returned the memorabilia to the box and continued my journey through the house, the archaeologist of my own life. In the home office, file cabinets contained the paper trail of our marriage, tax returns, insurance policies, the mortgage on this house we'd purchased when I was pregnant with the twins. The down payment had come mostly from my inheritance after my father died, money I'd insisted on contributing despite David's assurance that he could handle it alone. I'd wanted us to be equal partners in everything. Equal. The word tasted bitter now. On the bookshelf was a leather-bound photo album from our wedding. I pulled it down, feeling its substantial weight in my hands. The photographer had captured perfect moments. Our first dance, the cake cutting, David's mother crying as she adjusted his boutonniere, my father, thin from the cancer that would take him 2 years later, walking me down the aisle with fierce pride. My father had liked David, had been reassured by his steady income and career prospects. He'll take care of you, he'd said, as if that was the highest praise he could offer. But somewhere along the way, taking care of me had morphed into making decisions for me, directing our life's course with the same confidence he directed his clients' investments. I flipped to a photo of me with my bridesmaids, Jen and 3 college friends, all of us laughing in the late afternoon light. We were captured mid-conversation, champagne flutes in hand, my head thrown back in genuine mirth. When had I last laughed like that? Uninhibited, unself-conscious? Setting aside the wedding album, I moved to the living room where the built-in shelves displayed family photos in chronological order, a visual timeline of our life together. The twins as newborns, impossibly small in their hospital blankets. Their first birthday, faces smeared with cake. David's promotion celebration, his arm around my waist as he hoisted a champagne glass with the other hand, his colleagues applauding in the background. I paused at a photo taken 5 years ago at my 40th birthday. David had surprised me with a party at our favorite restaurant, inviting friends from every chapter of my life. The gesture had seemed so thoughtful at the time. Now I wondered if the grand public display had been less about celebrating me and more about showcasing his generosity as a husband. Had I been missing the signs all along? The last section of photos documented more recent years, family vacations that had grown increasingly rare as David's work demands intensified, and the twins' activities filled our weekends. A trip to London 2 summers ago, where David had spent most of the time on conference calls while I took Emma and Ethan to museums and landmarks. The Christmas card photo from last year, all of us in coordinated outfits, smiling on cue. So many memories, captured and framed and displayed as proof of our happiness. But photographs couldn't record the growing silences at dinner, the separate bedtime routines that evolved as David worked later and later, the subtle shift from partnership to parallel lives under the same roof. I wandered into the sunroom at the back of the house, my favorite space with its wall of windows overlooking the garden I'd painstakingly designed. Another creative outlet when full-time architecture work was no longer compatible with our family schedule. The perennials I'd planted were still in bloom, purple coneflowers and black-eyed Susans reaching for the autumn sunlight, oblivious to the human drama unfolding inside. On the small desk in the corner sat my drafting supplies and a portfolio of designs I'd created over the years. Some for actual clients through my part-time work at Linden & Brooke, others purely speculative, exercises to keep my skills sharp and my creativity alive. I opened the portfolio to find concepts for a lake house I'd designed last year, a project that had reinvigorated my professional passion. I remembered showing the renderings to David, explaining my approach to maximizing natural light while maintaining energy efficiency. He'd glanced at them briefly, commented that they looked nice, then returned to his phone. When I'd mentioned that the firm was impressed enough to offer me more client projects, he'd asked, "But what about the kids' schedule? Ethan has debate tournaments this spring, and Emma needs rides to orchestra." I'd backed down immediately, accepting his concern as valid, putting my ambitions on hold once again. The firm had given the lake house project to another architect. I'd told myself it was for the best. Our family needed me more than my career did. But something had withered inside me that day, a quiet death I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my reverie. Jen's voice called out, "Sarah, we're back." I closed the portfolio and went to meet them, steeling myself for the difficult conversations ahead. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her expression guarded. Ethan looked exhausted, older somehow than he had just hours ago. "Did Dad call you?" Emma asked immediately. "No," I admitted, "but I'm sure he will." Jen gave me a quick hug. "They ate something at least. I think we're all still in shock." Emma sank onto the living room sofa. "I don't understand why this is happening now. Why couldn't you work it out?" The question held echoes of David's manipulation, the suggestion that I was giving up too easily, that the dissolution of our marriage was my choice, rather than the consequence of his actions. "Emma," I said gently, sitting beside her, "sometimes working things out means recognizing when a relationship has become unhealthy. Your father broke trust in a fundamental way. People make mistakes," she countered, sounding so much like David it made my heart ache. "You always told us forgiveness is important. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to keep hurting you," I explained. And this wasn't a single mistake. It was months of deliberate deception. Ethan remained standing, arms crossed. "Dad texted me, said he's staying at Uncle Mark's for now. Wants us to know this is temporary and he'll fix everything." The confidence in David's message, his certainty that he could manage this crisis like any other, sparked a fresh wave of anger. He still didn't understand the depth of what he'd broken. "I need you both to know something," I said, looking between my children. "Whatever happens between your father and me doesn't change how much we love you. That will never change." Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears. "But everything else will change. Where we live, holidays, everything. Some things will change," I acknowledged. "But not the foundation of who we are as a family." "We're not a family anymore," Emma said bitterly. Ethan finally spoke up. "We're still a family, Em, just a different shape." His maturity surprised me, this glimpse of the man emerging from the boy I'd raised. Jen squeezed my shoulder. "I should go. Call me later." After she left, the three of us sat in the living room, surrounded by photographic evidence of the life we'd built and the changes we now faced. Outside, the October afternoon was fading, shadows lengthening across our lawn as day moved inexorably toward evening. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and logistics, painful conversations and practical decisions. But in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be present with my children, bearing witness to their pain while holding space for the possibility that something new and honest might eventually grow from these ashes. 3 weeks after David moved out, I sat in the sleek conference room of Sloan & Winters, the law firm Jen had recommended for the divorce. My attorney, Miranda Sloan, a sharp woman in her 50s with immaculate silver hair and a reputation for handling high-asset divorces with ruthless efficiency, was reviewing my financial disclosure documents. So you maintained part-time employment throughout the marriage while serving as the primary caregiver for your children, she confirmed, making notes on her legal pad. Yes, 15 to 20 hours a week at Linden and Brook Architecture, I explained. More when the kids were younger, less as their activities increased. Miranda nodded, scanning the papers. And your husband earns approximately $580,000 annually between his base salary and bonuses. That's what he reported on our taxes last year, I confirmed. Well, Miranda set down her pen, based on Massachusetts law and the length of your marriage, you're entitled to significant spousal support, a portion of his retirement accounts, and likely half the marital assets. The house has substantial equity. Do you want to keep it or sell? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the emotional fallout of the separation that I hadn't considered the practical realities of our future living arrangements. I don't know yet. Think about it, Miranda advised. Some clients find it healing to make a fresh start elsewhere. Others prefer the stability of remaining in the family home, especially when children are involved. I nodded, adding it to my mental list of impossible decisions. Now, Miranda continued, her tone shifting subtly, has David made any unusual financial moves since your separation? Withdrawals, transfers, sudden expenses? Not that I've noticed. We still have the joint accounts, though I opened my own checking account last week. Smart, she approved. And have you gathered all the evidence of his infidelity as I suggested? I patted my bag, which contained a folder of credit card statements, hotel receipts, and phone records. Everything I could find. Excellent. While Massachusetts doesn't require fault for divorce, evidence of adultery can sometimes influence. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Emma, unusual for her to call during school hours. Excuse me, I said to Miranda. It's my daughter, I answered, hearing Emma's breathless voice immediately. Mom, where are you? At my lawyer's office. What's wrong? You need to check your email, right now. The urgency in her voice sent alarm racing through me. Emma, what? Just check it. Everyone at school is talking about it. I ended the call and opened my email app with trembling fingers. At the top of my inbox was a message from an unfamiliar address, sent to dozens of recipients. The subject line read, "The real Sarah Mitchell." Is everything all right? Miranda asked, noticing my expression. I couldn't answer. The email contained a single paragraph and an attachment. For those who know David Mitchell and wondered why his marriage is suddenly ending, please see attached evidence of his wife's secret life. This is the real reason behind their separation, not his alleged affair. Sarah Mitchell has been leading a double life for years. The attachment was a photoshopped image of me, my face convincingly superimposed onto the body of a woman in lingerie, posing in what was clearly a hotel room. Oh my God, I whispered, my stomach lurching. Miranda came around the table, glancing at my phone. Her expression hardened. Forward that to me immediately. My hands shook so badly I could barely operate the phone. This was sent to everyone. My colleagues, the parents from the kids' school, our family friends. This is defamation and harassment, Miranda said crisply. Forward it to me, then shut off your phone. We're adding this to our case. As I forwarded the email, another notification appeared. A text from Nicole. Sarah, what the hell is going on? People are getting some crazy email about you. Then another from my boss at Linden and Brook. Sarah, please call me when you get this. Disturbing email circulating. I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications sank in. David hadn't just betrayed me privately. He was now trying to destroy me publicly. He's trying to make me look like the cheater, I said numbly, to rewrite the narrative. Miranda's expression was grim. This is actually good for us legally. It demonstrates malicious intent and harassment. But I understand this is personally devastating. Personally devastating. The clinical phrase couldn't begin to capture the humiliation washing over me. While I sat in this sterile conference room discussing alimony and asset division, David was systematically dismantling my reputation. And worse, Emma had seen it. All her friends had seen it. Her teachers, the other parents. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "My daughter." "Of course." Miranda gathered her papers. "But first, let me make one call." She stepped out of the conference room, returning 5 minutes later with a determined expression. "I've spoken to Judge Harrington's clerk. We're filing for an emergency restraining order based on harassment and defamation, and I'm having our digital forensics team trace the origin of that email. It will be from somewhere untraceable," I said dully. "David isn't stupid. Perhaps not, but he's clearly vindictive, which often leads to mistakes." She handed me her card. "My cell is on the back. Call anytime. And Sarah, document everything. Every call, text, email. This type of behavior rarely happens in isolation." I drove to Pearson Day School in a fog, the autumn colors along the parkway blurring through tears I refused to let fall. I'd cried enough in private. I wouldn't give David the satisfaction of seeing me broken in public. The school's elegant brick buildings came into view, the prestigious institution where Emma and Ethan had thrived, where parents networked at fundraisers and curriculum nights, where appearances mattered perhaps more than they should. I parked and made my way to the administrative building, ignoring the sidelong glances from two mothers collecting younger children from the adjacent elementary school. "Mrs. Mitchell," the school secretary greeted me with careful neutrality. "Principal Winters is expecting you. Emma and Ethan are already in her office." I found my children seated on a leather sofa in the principal's spacious office, Emma's face splotchy from crying, Ethan's expression stonily furious. Principal Winters, a dignified black woman who had led Pearson Day for nearly a decade, rose from behind her desk. "Sarah, thank you for coming so quickly." "Mom." Emma launched herself into my arms the moment I entered, clinging to me with a desperation I hadn't felt from her since she was a little girl frightened by thunderstorms. "I know, sweetheart," I murmured into her hair. "I know." Ethan remained seated, his jaw clenched. "Dad did this." Principal Winters gestured for me to sit. "I've spoken with both Emma and Ethan privately. The email in question was sent to several faculty members and, unfortunately, appears to have been forwarded to some students despite our strict policies against such behavior. Has anyone contacted my husband?" I asked, the word husband tasting like ash in my mouth. "Mr. Mitchell picked up Ethan's laptop yesterday for repairs," Principal Winters said carefully. Ethan had left it logged into his school email account. The implication was clear. David had used our son's laptop and school account to access email addresses. "You think Dad used my computer to send that?" Ethan asked, his voice cracking. That's... We don't know who sent the email," Principal Winters clarified quickly. "I'm simply providing the information we have." "It was him," Emma said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Who else would do this?" I stroked her hair, my mind racing. David had stooped lower than I thought possible, dragging our children into his vindictive campaign. "I've initiated our cyberbullying protocol," Principal Winters continued. "We've instructed faculty and students not to forward the email and to delete it immediately. Our IT department is working to trace its origin." "My lawyer is already involved," I assured her. "I'm getting an emergency restraining order." Principal Winters nodded approvingly. "Given the circumstances, I think it would be best for Emma and Ethan to take the rest of the day off, perhaps the rest of the week as well, until this situation stabilizes." Emma pulled away, wiping her tears. "I have a calculus test tomorrow. We'll make accommodations," the principal promised. As we left the office, I kept an arm around Emma, Ethan walking slightly ahead, his shoulders hunched with tension. In the parking lot, a group of junior girls fell silent as we approached, their eyes following Emma with the morbid fascination of teenagers witnessing real-life drama. "Don't look at them," I murmured to Emma. "Hold your head up." She straightened, channeling a dignity beyond her 16 years as we walked to my car. Once inside, however, she crumpled again. "Everyone saw it, Mom. Everyone's talking about it." "It's not true," I reminded her, reaching for her hand. "And anyone who knows me will know that. But it looked so real," she whispered. "Technology makes it easy to create convincing fakes," Ethan said from the back seat. "It's called deep faking. There are apps that can do it in minutes." I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my trembling hands. "Let's go home." We'll figure this out together. As I pulled out of the parking lot, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Jen's name appeared on the dashboard screen. Sarah, are you okay? I just got this horrible email. I know. I cut her off, conscious of the twins listening. I'm with Emma and Ethan now. We're heading home. I'll meet you there, Jen said immediately. And Sarah, Richard Carter called me looking for you. My blood turned to ice. Richard Carter, David's most important client and Elise's husband. Why would he call you? He said he's been trying to reach you. Something about wanting to talk before things get worse. After disconnecting, we drove in silence, each lost in private thoughts. At home, Emma went straight to her room while Ethan paced the kitchen, his expression darkening with each circuit. I'm going to call him, he announced suddenly. I want to hear him deny it. Ethan, wait, I began, but he was already dialing, putting the call on speaker. David answered on the second ring. Ethan, everything okay, son? Did you do it? Ethan demanded without preamble. Did you send that email from my laptop? A pause. What email? Ethan, what are you talking about? His performance of ignorance was flawless, the same tone he'd used when I confronted him with the hotel bill. The email calling Mom a cheater, the one with that fake picture of her, the one that got sent to everyone at school from my email account after you borrowed my laptop. Another calculated pause. Son, I have no idea what you're talking about. Is your mother there? Put her on. Ethan's face contorted with rage. Stop lying. Just stop. You're destroying everything. I gently took the phone from Ethan's shaking hand. David, your little stunt has resulted in an emergency restraining order and potential criminal charges for harassment and defamation. My lawyer will be in touch. Sarah, his voice hardened. I don't know what you've convinced our children of, but I had nothing to do with any email. If someone is harassing you, perhaps you should look at who might have motives besides me. Like who, David? Your girlfriend's husband, perhaps? A third pause, this one briefer. I'm coming over. We need to talk face to face. No, you're not, I said firmly. The restraining order prohibits it. And if you try, I'll call the police. You can't keep me from seeing my children, he snarled, the mask of reasonableness finally slipping. Actually, given your recent behavior, that's exactly what the court will allow me to do, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Goodbye, David. I ended the call to find Ethan staring at me with newfound respect. Mom, that was badass. Despite everything, I smiled. Language. The doorbell rang, and Ethan went to let Jen in. She rushed to embrace me, her expression fierce with protective anger. I can't believe he would stoop this low. I can, I said wearily. I just never thought he'd drag the kids into it. As Jen helped me make tea, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Richard Carter. We need to talk. It's important. I showed Jen the message. Should I respond? Absolutely not, she advised. Forward it to your lawyer. This could be another trap. I was about to do just that when my phone rang, the main number for Linden and Brook Architecture. Hello? I answered cautiously. Sarah, it's Martin. My boss's voice was grave. I need you to come to the office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. Martin, about that email. It's completely fabricated. My husband, 9 o'clock, he repeated, then hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Martin Linden had been my mentor for years, had always respected my work even as I scaled back my hours. Now he couldn't get off the phone with me fast enough. What did he say? Jen asked. Before I could answer, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression haunted. Dad's calling me. Should I answer? I wanted to say no, to protect her from whatever manipulation David might attempt, but she was 16, old enough to make some decisions for herself. That's up to you, honey. She hesitated, then took the call, putting it on speaker like Ethan had. Dad? Emma, sweetheart. David's voice softened immediately. Are you okay? I just heard about this awful email someone sent. Emma's eyes met mine, confusion evident in her expression. You didn't send it? Of course not. How could you think I would do something like that to your mother? To you and Ethan? I'd never humiliate our family that way. Emma's lower lip trembled. But it came right after you borrowed Ethan's laptop. Emma, listen to me. David's voice took on the patient tone he used when explaining complex concepts. I took Ethan's laptop to my IT guy because he said the battery wasn't holding a charge. I never accessed his email or anything else. Someone is trying to drive our family further apart, and it's working exactly as they planned. I watched doubt creep into Emma's expression. The same doubt I'd felt countless times when David rewrote reality to suit his narrative. The same doubt that had kept me silent, compliant, for years. Who would do that? Emma asked in a small voice. I don't know, sweetheart, David replied smoothly, but I intend to find out. In the meantime, I think you and Ethan should come stay with me for a few days, away from all this drama. I froze, seeing his strategy with crystal clarity. Use the crisis he created to position himself as the protective father, the voice of reason in chaos, the safe harbor. Emma looked at me uncertainly. Mom? I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to snatch the phone and confront David directly. Instead, I shook my head slightly, trusting Emma to make her own decision. I don't think that's a good idea right now, Dad, she said finally. I think I need to stay with Mom. David's disappointed sigh was audible. I understand, but I'm here when you're ready. I love you, Em. After Emma ended the call, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. What if he didn't do it? What if we're blaming him for something he didn't do? I crossed the kitchen and took her hands in mine. Emma, I can't tell you what to believe, but I want you to think about patterns of behavior, about truth and consequences. Think about what you know, not just what you're told. She nodded slowly, uncertainty still clouding her expression. But there was something else there too. The beginning of critical thought, of seeing beyond the surface of her father's charm to the manipulation beneath. The doorbell rang again, and Jen went to answer it. She returned with Miranda Sloan, who carried her briefcase and a determined expression. Sarah, we need to talk, she said briskly. We've traced the email to a public library in Wellesley, 3 blocks from where your husband is currently staying. That night, after Emma and Ethan had finally fallen asleep, and Jen had reluctantly gone home, I sat alone in my sunroom, wrapped in a cashmere throw David had given me 2 Christmases ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, finding comfort in a gift from the man who was systematically destroying my life. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, reflecting the glow of neighborhood lights in watery patterns across the glass. Inside, I nursed a glass of Cabernet and tried to make sense of how quickly everything had unraveled. Miranda had been blunt in her assessment. The email could be traced to the library, but not definitively to David. Without video evidence or witnesses placing him at that computer at that exact time, it remained circumstantial. Still, she had secured the emergency restraining order based on the timing, location, and the fact that he'd had access to Ethan's laptop shortly before the email was sent. The court sees patterns, she'd assured me. Even if we can't prove this specific incident beyond doubt, it establishes a concerning trajectory. My phone, silent for the past hour, suddenly lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Sarah, it's Elise Carter. Please don't block this number. We need to talk. I nearly dropped my wine glass. Elise Carter, the woman my husband had been sleeping with for 8 months, was reaching out directly. My first instinct was to ignore her, to maintain whatever shreds of dignity remained. But curiosity and a growing sense that I needed all the information I could get overrode my pride. What could we possibly have to talk about? I texted back. The response came immediately. David, and the fact that he's been lying to both of us. I hesitated, then replied, I'm listening, not over text. Can we meet tomorrow? The Boston Public Garden, 11 a.m. by the Swan Boats. Please come alone. I stared at the message, weighing my options. Meeting Elise could be a trap, another of David's manipulations, but it could also provide insights I desperately needed. After a moment's consideration, I typed, I'll be there. Setting down my phone, I moved to my laptop and opened the document I'd been avoiding all evening, the financial disclosure forms Miranda had asked me to complete. I needed to account for all assets, debts, income sources, and expenses for the divorce proceedings, a task that should have been straightforward, but was proving surprisingly complex. David had always handled our investments, our retirement accounts, our tax planning. I'd managed the household budget and bill payments, but the bigger financial picture had been his domain, his expertise after all. Now, navigating through statements and portfolios, I was finding gaps, inconsistencies. An investment property in Vermont I'd forgotten about, a timeshare in Aruba we'd barely used, stock options from David's firm that had vested years ago but never been exercised. And most concerning, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Small amounts, irregular intervals, dating back at least 3 years. I documented everything meticulously, following Miranda's advice to flag anything unusual without jumping to conclusions. But as the pattern emerged, a cold certainty settled in my chest. David had been preparing for this moment long before I discovered his affair. He'd been hiding assets, creating financial safety nets I wasn't privy to. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it sparked something unexpected, a clarity that cut through the emotional fog I'd been operating in since finding that hotel receipt. This wasn't just about his affair with Elise. This was about years of calculated decisions, of maintaining control, of creating escape hatches while I remained oblivious. I closed the laptop and moved to the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. For the first time since our separation, I allowed myself to really look at our marriage, not the photographic highlights displayed throughout the house, but the daily reality we'd lived. David's subtle dismissals of my career ambitions, his insistence on handling all major financial decisions, the way he'd position himself as the reasonable one during disagreements about the children, his habit of rewriting conflicts so that my reactions became the problem rather than his actions, the social gatherings where he'd interrupt my stories or correct minor details, undermining me so gently that even I hadn't recognized it for what it was. I'd been shrinking myself to fit into the space he'd allocated for me in our life, believing it was compromise, partnership. But it wasn't partnership when one person held all the power, made all the significant decisions, controlled the narrative. I thought of the architectural designs gathering dust in my portfolio, projects I'd abandoned or handed off because David had convinced me that our family needed me more than my career did. I thought of friendships I'd let fade because David found those particular friends draining or negative. I thought of vacations rerouted to destinations David preferred, of paint colors changed to suit his taste, of opinions swallowed because voicing them would lead to exhausting debates I rarely won. The woman I'd been at 27, ambitious, confident, outspoken, had been slowly erased, replaced by someone who sought approval before acting, who second-guessed her own judgment, who measured success by her husband's standards rather than her own. A text from Jen interrupted my reverie. "Just checking in. You hanging in there?" I typed back. "Having an epiphany, actually. I'll call you tomorrow." Setting down my phone, I moved through the darkened house to the master bathroom. The space David and I had once shared now felt wholly mine, his expensive shaving kit gone from the counter, his cologne no longer permeating the air. I switched on the light and stood before the mirror, really seeing myself perhaps for the first time in years. The woman who gazed back had faint lines at the corners of her eyes, a few strands of silver threaded through dark hair, a weariness in her expression that hadn't been there in wedding photos. But beneath the exhaustion, I detected something else, a resilience I'd forgotten I possessed, the same determination that had gotten me through architecture school, that had helped me balance motherhood with creative work, that had sustained me through my father's illness and death. That strength hadn't disappeared. It had just been redirected toward maintaining an illusion of perfect family life, of being the supportive wife, the ever-present mother. I'd invested so much energy in these roles that I'd lost sight of the woman who existed beyond them. I thought about what Miranda had asked earlier, whether I wanted to keep the house or sell it. At the time, the question had overwhelmed me. Now, looking around at the space David and I had created together, I realized it was filled with his preferences, his vision of what our home should be. The furniture he'd insisted was investment quality, the artwork he'd selected to impress visitors, the kitchen he'd wanted to showcase at dinner parties. Sell it, I whispered to my reflection. Start over. The decision, once made, lifted a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. This house, beautiful as it was, had become a museum of a marriage that no longer existed, and perhaps had never existed as I'd believed it did. Emma and Ethan would be off to college in less than 2 years. There was no reason to maintain this large space, these memories, these illusions. Moving to the bedroom, I opened the walk-in closet and surveyed the remaining traces of David, a forgotten tie, a spare set of cufflinks, winter clothes he hadn't yet collected. I gathered these items into a box, not out of spite, but out of a growing need to reclaim my space, my life. As I worked, I thought about Elise Carter, the woman who had been significant enough for David to risk using my credit cards, booking hotels in my name. Was she a victim in this too? or a willing participant in the deception. Tomorrow's meeting would perhaps provide answers, but I found myself less interested in the details of their affair and more focused on understanding my own journey out of it. I carried the box of David's things to the guest room and set it on the bed. Miranda would arrange for him to collect his possessions with a third-party escort, given the restraining order. Then I returned to the master bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, where I kept mementos and personal items. Among them was a small leather portfolio I hadn't opened in years, sketches and designs from my early career, before the twins, before scaling back to part-time work. Flipping through the pages, I was struck by the creativity, the ambition evident in each drawing. Buildings that would never exist, spaces that would never be inhabited, yet they represented possibilities, paths not taken. But it wasn't too late. At 43, I still had decades of productive work ahead of me. The twins would be in college soon, no longer needing my daily presence. What was stopping me from returning to full-time architecture? From pursuing the career I'd once been so passionate about? David, I realized. David had been stopping me, not with outright prohibitions, but with subtle discouragements, practical concerns, implied guilt about prioritizing work over family, and I had allowed it, internalizing his limitations until they became my own. No more, I said aloud, closing the portfolio and placing it on my nightstand where I would see it first thing in the morning, a reminder of who I had been and could be again. I returned to the sunroom to collect my wine glass and found my phone lit up with a final text for the night, this one from an unknown number. Sarah, it's Richard Carter. Please meet with Elise tomorrow. She has information you need to protect yourself. I'll be in touch afterward. I set the phone down without responding, but the message confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. This situation was larger and more complex than a simple affair. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new challenges. But for the first time since discovering that hotel receipt, I felt ready to face them. Not as David Mitchell's wife, but as Sarah Mitchell, architect, mother, woman reclaiming her power. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, where I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, no longer haunted by what I'd lost, but increasingly curious about what I might find. The Boston Public Garden was ablaze with autumn colors as I walked toward the Swan Boat dock the following morning. Though the boats weren't operating this late in October, the iconic location made an easy meeting point. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, partly from habit. I was chronically punctual, and partly to scope out the area, ensure I wasn't walking into an ambush. I spotted Elise Carter immediately. Even seated on a bench overlooking the pond, she commanded attention. Tall, slender, her blonde hair swept into an elegant low bun, her camel coat tailored perfectly to her frame. At 48, she was 5 years older than me but looked younger, the benefits of expensive maintenance and careful living evident in her smooth complexion and poised demeanor. She noticed me approaching and stood, revealing a sleek charcoal dress beneath the coat. No wedding ring, I observed automatically. Interesting. Sarah. She extended her hand formally, her grip firm, but not aggressive. Thank you for coming. I'm not sure why I did, I replied honestly, not sitting when she gestured to the bench. What could you possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? Elise nodded as if she'd expected this reception. I deserve that, but I'm not here to apologize or explain my relationship with David. I'm here because you're in danger, and I can help. Danger? I laughed without humor. David's vindictive and manipulative, but I don't think he's violent. Not physical danger. Elise glanced around, then reached into her designer bag and withdrew a thumb drive. Financial danger. David's been laundering money through your joint accounts for years. Richard and I have the proof. I stared at the small device she held out, unable to process her words. What are you talking about? Please, sit. Her voice softened. This will take some explanation. I sat, maintaining distance between us, not touching the thumb drive she placed on the bench between us. You know Richard's company, Carter Maritime? She began. International shipping, logistics, David's biggest client. Yes. 3 years ago, Richard discovered financial irregularities, funds being moved through complex channels, routed through offshore accounts, then returning to the company books as consulting fees. David was orchestrating it, using his position as financial advisor to create a sophisticated laundering operation. My mind raced to make sense of her claims. If that's true, why didn't Richard report it? Fire David? because by the time Richard pieced it together, he was implicated. The money trail led through his personal accounts too. David had set it up so Richard appeared complicit. Elise's perfectly manicured fingers tapped nervously against her knee. Richard had a choice: report David and risk his own prosecution, or play along while gathering evidence to extricate himself. "And where do you fit in?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Elise met my gaze directly. "I'm an attorney specializing in financial crime. Richard brought me in initially as a consultant, not his wife, to review the situation confidentially. That's how I met David. And decided to sleep with him?" I couldn't help the bitter comment. "No." Her voice remained steady. "I decided to get close to him, to gain his trust, to access information Richard couldn't." I blinked, processing her implication. "You're saying the affair was, what, a sting operation?" "Initially, yes." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm not proud of the methods, but we needed to understand how deep the scheme went. Who else was involved? So you seduced my husband as corporate espionage?" "It wasn't supposed to be an actual affair," Elise admitted. "Just close enough to gain his confidence. But David is persuasive. Things progressed further than intended." I laughed harshly. "That's quite an understatement." "Sarah," Elise's tone became urgent, "I understand you have every reason to hate me. But right now, we need to focus on the evidence on this drive. David has implicated you in his financial crimes. Your signature is on dozens of documents you probably don't remember signing. When this scheme collapses, and it will, you could face charges unless you can prove you were an unwitting participant." My hands grew cold as her words sank in. The unexplained transfers I'd noticed while preparing the financial disclosure forms. The investment accounts I hadn't known about. The paperwork David had casually asked me to sign over the years. "Just routine stuff, honey, for the accountant." "Why are you doing this?" I asked finally. "Warning me?" Elise's perfect composure cracked slightly, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "Because I have a daughter, too. Because when Richard and I turn over our evidence to the SEC next week, your life will implode in ways you can't imagine. And because..." She hesitated. "What started as a calculated plan became complicated. I saw how David treated you, talked about you. No woman deserves that." I picked up the thumb drive, weighing it in my palm. "How do I know this isn't another trap? Something David orchestrated to further discredit me?" "You don't," she acknowledged. "But think about it logically. What would David gain from me giving you financial evidence against him? Look at the files. Verify them independently. Then decide what to do with the information." She stood, adjusting her coat with practiced elegance. "Richard and I are leaving the country tomorrow, a previously planned business trip that provides convenient distance from what's about to happen. We've hired our own criminal defense attorneys and negotiated cooperation agreements with the authorities. You should do the same." She handed me a business card. "This lawyer specializes in financial crime defense. Tell her I referred you." I took the card automatically, still struggling to process everything. "The email," I said suddenly. "The fake photo of me. Was that you?" Elise shook her head. "That was all David. When he realized Richard and I were pulling away, protecting ourselves, he panicked. Started looking for leverage, ways to discredit potential witnesses. You were the most vulnerable target. And the hotel rooms in my name? Classic misdirection. If questions arose about suspicious financial activity, he could point to your apparent double life, create reasonable doubt about who was responsible." She checked her watch. "A discreet Patek Philippe that probably cost more than my car. I need to go. Richard's waiting." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. There's a safe deposit box at Boston Federal Trust, registered in your name. Box 342. David opened it 3 years ago, using your identification information. I don't know what's in it, but he visits monthly. The access key is likely in his personal files." Before I could respond, she walked away, her heels clicking purposefully along the path, leaving me alone with a thumb drive that potentially held the keys to my destruction or salvation. I sat for several minutes, watching ducks glide across the pond, trying to make sense of this new reality. If Elise was telling the truth, I wasn't just facing divorce. I was potentially facing criminal charges, financial ruin, maybe even prison. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called Miranda. "I need to see you immediately. Something's come up." I'm in depositions until 3, she replied. This can't wait. It's about potential financial crimes David may have committed using my name. There was a brief silence then. Come to my office now. I'll have my assistant reschedule the depositions. 30 minutes later, I sat in Miranda's office, watching her face as she reviewed the contents of the thumb drive on her secure computer. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she clicked through documents, spreadsheets, email exchanges. This is, she finally said, removing her reading glasses, extraordinarily serious, if legitimate. We need to bring in a criminal attorney immediately. Is it legitimate? I asked, my voice tight. Or could this be another of David's manipulations? Miranda shook her head slowly. This level of documentation would be nearly impossible to fabricate. Bank transfers, corporate records, offshore account details. It's extensive and internally consistent. And unfortunately, she added gently, it does show your signature on multiple concerning documents. I didn't know what I was signing, I said, the defense sounding weak even to my ears. I believe you. Miranda picked up her phone, which is why we need Diane Levinson on this immediately. She dialed, exchanged brief pleasantries with someone on the other end, then explained the situation in careful, measured terms. After hanging up, she turned back to me. Diane can see us at 5. She's the best financial crimes defense attorney in Massachusetts. In the meantime, I need you to think carefully about any documents David asked you to sign over the years, any financial institutions you've visited together, any notaries who might remember you. I nodded, my mind already cataloging possibilities. There's something else. Elise mentioned a safe deposit box at Boston Federal Trust, opened in my name without my knowledge. Box 342. Miranda wrote this down, her pen pressing firmly into the paper. Do you have any identification that David might have used to open this? A passport he could have accessed, perhaps? My passport is in our home safe, I realized, along with my birth certificate, social security card, all the standard important documents. David has always had the combination. We'll need to secure those immediately. Miranda was already reaching for her phone again. I'll have my assistant arrange for a locksmith to meet us at your home. We'll change the safe combination today. As she made arrangements, I sat staring at my hands, the same hands that had signed countless documents over the years, without fully understanding their contents or implications. How easily I had trusted, how willingly I had deferred to David's expertise in financial matters. The restraining order complicates accessing the safe deposit box, Miranda mused after ending her call. Legally, you can't ask David for the key, and we can't prove to the bank it was fraudulently opened without tipping our hand. So what do? First, we meet with Diane and develop a comprehensive defense strategy. Then, we consider approaching the bank with evidence of identity theft. She leaned forward. Sarah, I need to ask, is there any possibility David has copies of keys to your house? Could he access it while you're not there? The question sent a chill through me. He returned his house keys when he moved out, but he could easily have made copies. Then we need to change your locks immediately, too. Miranda's efficiency was reassuring amidst my growing panic. And install a security system if you don't already have one. We have a system, but David knows the codes. Change them today. All of them. Email passwords, banking passwords, alarm codes, everything. She made more notes. And I want you to gather any financial documents you can find in the house before our meeting with Diane. Anything with your signature particularly. I nodded, mentally cataloging the filing cabinets in our home office, the boxes of tax returns in the attic, the drawer in David's desk where he kept insurance policies and investment statements. One last thing, Miranda said, her tone softening slightly. How are Emma and Ethan handling everything? They're confused, hurt. Emma's not sure what to believe about the email incident. Ethan is angry, mostly at David, but at the situation too. I rub my temples, feeling a headache building. They're staying home from school for the rest of the week. Principal Winters suggested it. Good. Keep them close, but also consider being strategic about what you share regarding these financial issues. They may eventually be interviewed if this becomes a criminal case. The casual mention of criminal case made my stomach lurch. They're 16, I protested. They shouldn't be involved in this at all. In an ideal world, they wouldn't be, Miranda agreed. But David has already drawn them in by using Ethan's laptop for that email. We need to prepare for the possibility that he'll continue to involve them, directly or indirectly. I left Miranda's office with a detailed action plan and a growing sense of resolve. Whatever David had done, Whatever he was still doing, I would protect myself and my children. I would not be collateral damage in his schemes. At home, I found Jen watching movies with Emma and Ethan in the family room, a cocoon of normalcy in the midst of chaos. I smiled gratefully at my sister, then asked for her help changing all the locks while the locksmith Miranda had arranged worked on the safe. By late afternoon, the house was secure. New locks, new safe combination, new alarm codes. I'd gathered every financial document I could find and packed them into 2 banker's boxes for my meeting with Diane Levinson. The twins remained insulated in their movie marathon, though Ethan occasionally cast concerned glances my way, intuiting that something beyond the email incident was unfolding. As I prepared to leave for the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The safe deposit box contains backup documentation. Access code to the key lockbox in David's apartment. 3479, RC. Richard Carter, reaching out directly now. I showed the message to Jen, who raised her eyebrows. "This is getting very cloak and dagger," she observed. "Do you trust them?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But their story makes sense of things that didn't before, and at this point I need all the information I can get." "Be careful," she warned. "People who operate at this level, corporate espionage, financial fraud, they're playing games you haven't been trained for." She was right, of course. I'd spent the past 16 years focused on raising children and maintaining a part-time career in architecture, not navigating high-stakes financial intrigue. But something had awakened in me since finding that hotel receipt. A determination, a clarity of purpose, a willingness to fight not just for my dignity, but for my future. "I'm learning quickly," I told her, hefting the boxes of financial documents. "And I have good teachers." As I drove to meet Diane Levinson, the criminal defense attorney, I realized that the woman David had married, the accommodating, trusting architect who deferred to his financial expertise, was indeed gone. In her place was someone stronger, more cautious, and infinitely more determined. David had underestimated me. It would be his most costly mistake. The conference room at Levinson and Associates overlooked Boston Harbor, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished table where I sat surrounded by 3 attorneys. Miranda Sloan to my right, Diane Levinson across from me, and a forensic accounting specialist named Marcus Way to my left. The banker's boxes of financial documents I'd gathered were now spread across the table, organized into neat piles by year and account type. "So, to summarize," Diane was saying, her voice precise as her tailored navy suit, "we have evidence suggesting your husband used your identity to open accounts, sign documents, and potentially launder money through your joint finances. The primary question now is whether we approach the authorities proactively or prepare a defense in anticipation of their investigation." I glanced at the harbor outside, where boats moved with purpose through the darkening water. "What's the difference in outcomes?" "Potentially significant," Diane replied. "Cooperation agreements typically lead to reduced charges or even immunity, depending on your level of involvement. But they require complete transparency. Everything you know, everyone involved. The alternative is waiting until charges are filed, then defending against them, which gives us more control over disclosure but carries greater risk." Marcus tapped his pen against a spreadsheet. "Based on what I've reviewed so far, there's a clear pattern of your husband moving funds through multiple accounts to obscure their origin. Your signatures appear on many of these documents, but inconsistently. Some look authentic, others show signs of being either forged or signed under false pretenses. I signed whatever David put in front of me," I admitted, the acknowledgement painful. "Tax returns, investment forms, insurance policies. I trusted him to handle our finances." Miranda squeezed my arm gently. "That trust was reasonable in a marriage. The courts will recognize that." "Perhaps," Diane tempered. "But financial crimes carry a high burden of proof regarding intent. We need to demonstrate not just that you were unaware, but that a reasonable person in your position would have had no cause for suspicion." The weight of my situation pressed down, heavier with each clinical assessment. This wasn't just about divorce anymore, or even public humiliation. This was about potential criminal liability, about my freedom, my future, my children's well-being. "What's our next step?" I asked, straightening my shoulders. "We need that safe deposit box," Diane said without hesitation. "If Richard Carter is correct and it contains backup documentation, it could be the key to building your defense, or potentially incriminating you further." We can file an emergency petition for access, Miranda suggested, claiming suspicion of fraudulent activity. Too slow, Diane countered, and it alerts David that we're on to him. He could empty it before the court grants access. A third option hung unspoken in the air. The code Richard had sent me, the implication that I could access David's apartment, find the key, and retrieve the contents myself. Legally questionable at best, potentially criminal at worst. What about a private investigator? I suggested. Someone who could document David's activities, gather evidence legally. Diane nodded approvingly. Good thinking. I work with several reputable firms. We can have someone on him starting tomorrow. In the meantime, Marcus added, I need complete access to all your financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, everything for at least the past 5 years. The more comprehensive the picture, the better I can identify suspicious patterns. I thought of the thumb drive from Elise, still in my purse. I have something that might help with that. For the next hour, we reviewed the documents Elise had provided, Marcus growing increasingly grim as he analyzed the complex financial web they revealed. This is sophisticated money laundering, he concluded. Multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, strategic transfers designed to obscure the money trail. And yes, your name and identity appear throughout. Can you tell how much money was involved? Miranda asked. Marcus frowned at his calculations. Based on these documents alone, approximately $12 million over 3 years. But that's likely just the portion we can see. The figure stunned me into silence. $12 million, circulating through accounts connected to my name. Money I'd never seen, transactions I'd never authorized, crimes I'd never committed, yet could be held accountable for. I need to protect my children, I said finally. If I'm charged, if this becomes public, one step at a time, Diane counseled. First, we gather evidence. Then we approach the authorities on our terms, with a compelling narrative of your victimization in this scheme. And the safe deposit box? I pressed. Diane and Miranda exchanged glances. We'll pursue legal avenues to access it, Miranda assured me. In the meantime, document everything. Any communication from David, any suspicious activity, any recollections of signing papers or visiting financial institutions. As the meeting concluded, I felt simultaneously overwhelmed and oddly empowered. For the first time, I was taking active control of a situation David had orchestrated from the shadows. I was fighting back, not with the emotional outbursts he would expect, but with methodical, strategic planning. Outside Diane's office, the Boston evening had turned brisk, the autumn air carrying a hint of the winter to come. I pulled my coat tighter and checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Emma and a text from Ethan. Mom, Dad showed up. Aunt Jen wouldn't let him in. Police came. Please call ASAP. My heart racing. I called Emma immediately. Mom! Her voice was shaky. Dad tried to get us to go with him. He said you were lying about everything, that we weren't safe with you. When Aunt Jen wouldn't let him in, he started yelling. The neighbors called the police. Are you okay? Is everyone safe? Yeah, the police made him leave. They said something about a restraining order. Mom, he seemed really scary, not like Dad at all. I'm coming home right now, I promised, already heading to my car. Stay inside, keep the doors locked. I called Miranda as I navigated through evening traffic, explaining the situation. This is good, she said to my surprise. He violated the restraining order. We'll file for contempt immediately, and it strengthens our case for emergency custody orders. At home, I found 2 police cruisers still parked outside. Inside, a female officer was taking statements from Jen and the twins, while her partner spoke with neighbors who had witnessed David's confrontation. Mrs. Mitchell, the officer greeted me. I'm Officer Reyes. Your husband violated a restraining order by coming to this residence. We'll need your statement as well. After the police left, with promises to increase patrols in our neighborhood, I gathered Emma and Ethan in the kitchen. They deserved some explanation, some framework for understanding the chaos engulfing our family. I need to tell you something difficult, I began, choosing my words carefully. Your father is under investigation for financial irregularities at work. It's complicated and involves his client, Richard Carter. Is that why he's acting so crazy? Ethan asked. Because he's in trouble? I think so, I acknowledged. He's feeling cornered, and unfortunately, he's not handling it well. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Is he going to go to jail? The question pierced me. How much should I reveal? How much could they handle? I don't know, I answered honestly. But what's important right now is keeping all of us safe while this gets sorted out. That's why I changed the locks and alarm codes. He said you're trying to turn us against him, Emma said quietly. That none of this is what it seems. I imagine he believes that, I replied, choosing neutrality over contradiction. People under extreme stress often see threats everywhere. Ethan, always more analytical, fixed me with a penetrating look. Are we in trouble too? Financially, I mean. My brilliant son, cutting straight to the practical implications. We might face some challenges, I admitted. But I'm working with lawyers to protect us. You don't need to worry about college funds or anything immediate. This at least was true. Miranda had helped me secure and segregate the twins' education accounts immediately after filing for divorce, placing them under court protection. After reassuring the twins as best I could, and thanking Jen profusely for her intervention with David, I retreated to my bedroom to process the day's revelations. The thumb drive from Elise, the safe deposit box revelation from Richard, David's increasingly erratic behavior. It all pointed to a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. Judge granted emergency custody order based on restraining order violation. Sheriff will serve papers to David tomorrow. No visitation until hearing next week. One small victory in what promised to be a protracted battle. I texted back a quick thanks, then noticed an email notification from Martin Linden at the architecture firm, the meeting I'd nearly forgotten about in today's chaos. Sarah, the email read, after reviewing the situation, the partners have decided it's best if you take a paid leave of absence until the current personal matters are resolved. This is not disciplinary action, but a mutual protection measure during a sensitive time. Please call me tomorrow to discuss transitional arrangements for your projects. The dismissal, however gently phrased, stung deeply. My professional identity, the one thing I'd maintained throughout my marriage, even in reduced form, was now compromised too. David's destructive reach extended in all directions. I allowed myself 5 minutes of tears, not of self-pity, but of rage, frustration, and finally, resolve. Then I washed my face, changed into comfortable clothes, and returned to the living room where Ethan was setting up the air mattress he'd insisted on placing near the front door. What are you doing? I asked. Standing guard, he said simply, in case Dad comes back. My heart broke and swelled simultaneously at my 16-year-old son, appointing himself protector of our shattered household. Ethan, honey, the police are patrolling, and we have the new alarm system. Still, he insisted, arranging his pillow with the same precision he applied to debate preparations. I'll sleep better, knowing I'm here. I didn't argue further, recognizing his need to exert some control in a situation where we all felt powerless. Instead, I sat on the edge of the air mattress and helped him smooth the blanket. You know, I said carefully, what's happening with your father doesn't define him completely. He made serious mistakes, but he's still the dad who taught you to ride a bike and coached your little league team. Ethan looked up, his expression mature beyond his years. I know, Mom. But he's also the dad who's scaring us now. People can be both, right? Good and bad? Yes, I agreed, my throat tight. People are complicated, and sometimes they do terrible things when they're desperate or afraid. Later that night, after confirming Emma was finally asleep, I sat at my laptop in the sunroom, the house quiet, except for the occasional creaks of an old New England home settling. The email from Martin Linden glowed on my screen, its diplomatic phrasing masking what was essentially professional exile. Instead of closing it in defeat, I opened a new document and began typing a response. Martin, I understand the firm's position and accept the leave of absence. However, I'd like to propose an alternative arrangement for my return. The past decade of part-time work has limited my professional growth and contribution to Linden and Brooke. When this personal situation stabilizes, I'd like to discuss returning in a full-time capacity, with expanded responsibilities more aligned with my training and experience. I outlined my vision for a more substantial role, projects I could lead, clients I could develop. It was a declaration of intent, a refusal to retreat further from the career I'd compromised for so long. After sending the email, I opened a second document, this one a personal inventory. On the left, I listed everything David potentially had against me. Signatures on questionable documents, joint accounts used for suspicious transactions, emails or texts that could be misconstrued. On the right, I listed my emerging assets. The thumb drive from Elise, Miranda and Diane's legal expertise, the pending private investigator's findings, potential evidence in the safe deposit box, and most importantly, the truth of my ignorance regarding David's schemes. It wasn't enough yet. I needed more. More evidence, more leverage, more understanding of exactly what David had done and how deeply I was implicated. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Same place. Come alone. Important new information. A. Elise again, with potentially more evidence. The risk of meeting her a second time was considerable. What if David was monitoring her movements? What if this was a trap? But the potential reward was greater. I needed every advantage I could gather, every piece of information that might help extricate me from the legal quicksand David had created. I texted back a single word: confirmed. Then I opened my laptop to research one more critical piece of information: how to access a lockbox using a code without a key. Because regardless of what Diane had said about legal avenues, I knew the truth. If that safe deposit box contained what Richard Carter claimed, I couldn't afford to wait for court orders and official channels, not with David growing increasingly desperate. Sometimes I was learning, you had to create your own justice when the system moved too slowly. And sometimes, the cautious architect who had deferred to her husband's judgment for 15 years had to step aside for the woman now fighting for her freedom and her children's future. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more decisions, more risks. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt prepared to face them. Not as David Mitchell's wife, but as Sarah Mitchell, architect of her own destiny. The Boston Public Garden looked different in the morning light, less romantic, more practical, joggers and commuters cutting efficient paths through its manicured landscape. I arrived early again, this time positioning myself with a clear view of all approaching paths. If this was a trap, I wouldn't be caught unaware. Elise appeared precisely at 10, today dressed in a sleek pantsuit that suggested business rather than clandestine meeting. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with purpose, scanning the area with the same cautious awareness I was employing. "Sarah," she greeted me, not offering her hand this time. "Thank you for coming." "You mentioned new information," I said, skipping preliminaries. "Yes." She sat beside me on the bench, maintaining professional distance. "The SEC has accelerated their timeline. They're executing search warrants at Brennan and Associates today, and at your home." My stomach dropped. "My home? Now?" "Likely within hours. Richard's attorneys negotiated our cooperation agreement yesterday. Things are moving quickly." She opened her portfolio and extracted a sealed envelope. "These are copies of documents showing that David forged your signature on key transfers. Our forensic expert has authenticated them. Your genuine signatures versus the forgeries." I took the envelope, my hand steady despite my racing heart. "Why are you helping me like this?" Elise's perfect composure slipped momentarily, revealing something that looked almost like guilt. "I told you before, no woman deserves what David's done to you. There's more to it than that," I pressed. "This goes beyond professional courtesy or female solidarity." She held my gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "My daughter is 19. 5 years ago, she became involved with her college professor, a manipulative man 30 years her senior. He nearly destroyed her." Elise straightened, her vulnerability disappearing behind her professional mask. "Let's just say I recognize the pattern. David is cut from the same cloth." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked it, then stood abruptly. "I have to go. The warrants are being executed now. Richard and I are flying to Zurich tonight." She hesitated, then added, "The lockbox in David's apartment, the one holding the safe deposit key, is in the master bedroom closet, behind the suit rack, floor level." My breath caught. "How do you know that?" The look she gave me was equal parts regret and defiance. "Where do you think we met when your name was on the hotel receipts?" The frank admission stung, but I pushed past it. "And the safe deposit box? Do you know what's in it?" "Not specifically, but David called it his insurance policy." something significant enough to protect him if everything else failed. She glanced at her watch. The FBI will have agents at your house within the hour. Be there to meet them. Cooperate fully. Your innocence will be clearer if you're transparent from the beginning. With that, she walked away, her confident stride never faltering. I watched until she disappeared around a bend in the path, then opened the envelope she'd given me. Inside were color copies of documents with split comparisons, my authentic signatures from personal records alongside forged versions on financial forms. The differences were subtle but distinct, especially when highlighted by the forensic examiner's notations. I gathered the papers and headed toward my car, calling Miranda as I walked. "The FBI is executing search warrants today," I said when she answered. "At Brennan and Associates and our house. I'm heading home now." "How do you know this?" Miranda's voice sharpened. "Elise Carter. She just told me." "Sarah." Miranda's tone was careful, measured. "I need you to listen very carefully. Do not go home. Come to my office immediately. If federal agents are executing warrants, the situation has escalated beyond what we anticipated. You need legal representation present for any interaction with them. But the twins, call Jen. Have her pick them up from the house before the agents arrive if possible. Otherwise, she should stay with them during the search. But you need to be here, with Diane and me, preparing for what comes next." I changed direction, heading toward downtown instead of the suburbs. "What about the safe deposit box?" Elise confirmed it exists, and she knows where David keeps the key. "Forget the box for now," Miranda instructed firmly. "Federal involvement changes our approach entirely. We focus on establishing your cooperation and innocence from the outset." At Miranda's office, I found her conferring with Diane Levinson and a new attorney she introduced as Edward Chen, a former federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. "The warrants mean they have substantial evidence already," Edward explained, his manner calm but intense. "Our priority now is positioning you as a victim of your husband's schemes, rather than a participant." "That's the truth," I insisted. I didn't know what he was doing. "Truth and legal reality don't always align perfectly," Edward cautioned. "We need to be strategic about how we present your case to the authorities." For the next hour, they prepared me for FBI questioning. What to expect, how to respond, which questions I should defer to counsel. Throughout, my phone buzzed with updates from Jen, who had reached the house just as FBI agents arrived. "They're being professional," she reported, "very clear about what they're looking for. Financial records, computers, storage devices. Emma's upset, but managing. Ethan is asking a lot of questions. I ached to be with my children, to shield them from this invasion of their home, to explain what was happening in terms they could understand. Instead, I sat in a law office downtown, rehearsing answers to questions about financial transactions I'd never knowingly participated in. "What happens now?" I asked after we'd covered the essentials. "Now," Diane said, "we request a formal meeting with the prosecutors handling the case. We present you as a cooperating witness who was unaware of her husband's criminal activities. We offer everything you know in exchange for immunity. And if they don't believe me?" The three attorneys exchanged glances. Edward spoke first. "Then we prepare for a more adversarial process. But given what we know so far, your position as an unwitting participant is credible and demonstrable." My phone rang. Ethan this time, not Jen. "Mom, Dad's here. He's trying to get past the FBI agents. It's bad." I put the call on speaker so the attorneys could hear. "Is he inside the house?" I asked urgently. "No. He's out front arguing with them. He keeps saying they have no right to be here, that they're violating his privacy." Ethan's voice was strained but controlled. "The agents are telling him to step back, that they have a warrant." "Where are you and Emma?" "Upstairs in my room with Aunt Jen. The agents told us to stay up here while they search downstairs." In the background, I could hear raised voices, David's distinctive tenor becoming more agitated. "Ethan, stay where you are," I instructed. "Don't engage with your father. Let the FBI handle him." "Okay, but..." He broke off, and I heard a commotion through the phone. Shouts, a crash, Emma's cry of alarm. "Ethan, what's happening?" "Dad tried to push past the agents," he reported, his voice tight with tension. "They stopped him. I think they're arresting him now." Miranda was already on her phone, calling someone at the U.S. Attorney's office. Diane was taking notes rapidly. Edward moved closer to listen to my call with Ethan. "Can you see what's happening?" I asked, From my window. They've got him in handcuffs. He's still yelling. Ethan's voice dropped lower. Mom, he looks... I've never seen him like this. He's completely lost it. The image of David, always so controlled, so careful about appearances, being handcuffed in front of our home, in view of neighbors and his children, sent a complex wave of emotions through me. Shock, a vindictive satisfaction I wasn't proud of, and finally, a deep sadness for Emma and Ethan, witnessing their father's public disgrace. I need to go to them, I said, standing abruptly. My children need me there. Edward shook his head emphatically. Not yet. If David's being arrested, the scene is active and volatile. Wait until we confirm he's been removed and the situation is stable. It was another hour before that confirmation came, a call from the lead FBI agent at the scene, requesting I return home to receive an inventory of items seized during the search. By then, David had been taken to the federal courthouse for booking on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. When I finally arrived home, the FBI agents were boxing the last of their evidence: laptops, external hard drives, financial documents from David's office, even the family desktop computer from the den. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with the steady demeanor of someone who had seen it all, handed me a detailed receipt. We've seized only what the warrant specified, she assured me. We'll return any personal items not relevant to the investigation as soon as possible. I nodded, scanning the multi-page inventory. My children, they're upstairs with your sister, she confirmed. They've been cooperative and respectful. You should be proud of how they've handled this difficult situation. After the agents left, I found Emma, Ethan, and Jen in Emma's bedroom, the twins unusually quiet, Jen looking exhausted but resolute. They arrested Dad, Emma said the moment I entered, her eyes red from crying. They put him in a police car in front of everyone. I sat beside her on the bed. I know. I'm so sorry you had to see that. What did he do? Ethan asked directly. The FBI agents wouldn't tell us specifics. I took a deep breath. Your father is being charged with financial crimes, using his position at Brennan and Associates to move money illegally. It's complicated, and I don't understand all of it myself yet. Are you in trouble too? Emma's question held a tremor of fear. No, I assured her, hoping it was true. My lawyers are working with the authorities to clarify that I wasn't involved in your father's activities. But your name was on the accounts, Ethan observed, always quick to connect dots. That's why they searched our house, not just Dad's apartment. Yes, I acknowledged. Part of what your father did involved using my name without my knowledge. Like the hotel rooms, Emma said quietly. Like the hotel rooms, I confirmed. And other things as well. Jen stood, stretching her back. You three probably need some time alone. I'm going to make some sandwiches. No one's eaten all day. After she left, I pulled both twins close, one on each side of me, just as I'd done when they were small and frightened by storms or nightmares. They didn't resist. Even Ethan, usually so careful about maintaining teenage distance. I need you both to understand something, I said carefully. Whatever happens with these legal proceedings, whatever they say about your father in the news or at school, it doesn't erase the good parts of who he is or what he's been to you. People are complicated. They can make terrible mistakes without being terrible in their entirety. Will he go to prison? Emma asked, her voice small. I don't know, I answered honestly. It's possible. These are serious charges. Good, Ethan said suddenly, his voice hard. He deserves it after what he did to you. To us. Ethan? I chided gently. Your father is still your father. It's okay to be angry with him, but try not to let that anger consume you. How can you defend him? He demanded. After everything? I chose my words carefully. I'm not defending his actions, but I've had to learn something difficult these past weeks. That holding on to rage, however justified, only hurts me in the end. You and Emma will need to find your own way forward with your father, whatever that looks like. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. David being arraigned now. Bail hearing set for tomorrow morning. We need to talk tonight about next steps. The relentless pace of events continued, pulling me away from this moment of connection with my children toward more legal consultations, more strategic decisions. But for now, holding Emma and Ethan close in the aftermath of the day's trauma, I allowed myself to simply be their mother, not a potential witness, not a divorcing spouse, not a woman rebuilding her identity, but simply the one constant they could rely on as their world continued to fracture around them. Later that evening, after the twins had finally fallen asleep, Emma in her own bed, Ethan once again on the air mattress near the front door, despite my assurances that his father wouldn't be returning tonight, I sat in the kitchen with Miranda and Diane, reviewing the day's developments. David's being represented by Cameron Walsh, Miranda reported, naming one of Boston's most prominent criminal defense attorneys. He's pleading not guilty on all counts and claiming you were fully aware of all financial activities. The accusation, though expected, still stung. Of course he is. He's never taken responsibility for anything. The good news, Diane countered, is that the U.S. attorney seems receptive to our cooperation proposal. Your documented history of limited involvement in financial decisions, plus the evidence Elise Carter provided showing forged signatures, supports your position as an unwitting participant. What about the safe deposit box? I asked. It could contain evidence that helps my case. The FBI is requesting a warrant for all of David's known financial repositories, Miranda explained. But these things take time, and without specific knowledge of what the box contains, it may not be prioritized immediately. I thought about the code Richard had sent me, about Elise's confirmation that the key was hidden in David's apartment. With David in custody and a bail hearing not until tomorrow, the opportunity to access that key, and the box it opened, was now. I understand, I said carefully, not revealing the plan forming in my mind. After the attorneys left, I called Jen, asking if she could stay with the twins for a few more hours. There's something I need to do, I explained vaguely. Something that might help my case. Sarah, Jen's tone held warning. Don't do anything that could compromise your position legally. You've got good attorneys working for you. I know, I assured her. This is just tying up loose ends. 40 minutes later, I stood outside David's apartment building in downtown Boston, a sleek high-rise with views of the Charles River that he'd leased immediately after moving out. The doorman recognized me from my previous visits to drop off additional clothing and personal items David had requested. Mrs. Mitchell, he greeted me with professional courtesy. Mr. Mitchell isn't in this evening. I know, I said, summoning my most confident smile. He asked me to pick up some files he needs urgently. He would have called ahead, but I let the implication hang that David's current situation prevented such communication. The doorman hesitated only briefly. He'd seen me enter with my own key before, when dropping off David's things. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Do you need assistance with anything? No, thank you. I know exactly what he needs. The elevator ride to the 12th floor gave me time to calm my racing heart. What I was doing wasn't technically illegal. I was still legally married to David, still had legitimate access to his residence as his spouse. But the intent behind my visit existed in a gray area that made my architectural mind, accustomed to clear blueprints and defined boundaries, deeply uncomfortable. Inside the apartment, David's presence was palpable, his expensive cologne lingering in the air, his meticulous organization evident in the precisely arranged furnishings. Unlike our family home with its accumulated history and organic growth, this space felt curated, a deliberate presentation of the image he wanted to project. Successful, sophisticated, in control. I moved directly to the master bedroom, remembering Elise's instructions. The walk-in closet held an extensive collection of suits arranged by color and season, each with coordinating ties and pocket squares. I pushed aside the rack, revealing a small wall safe mounted at floor level, exactly where Elise had indicated. The code Richard had provided, 3479, worked on the first try, the safe opening with a soft click that seemed unnaturally loud in the silent apartment. Inside was a single item, a small key attached to a tag labeled BFT 342 in David's precise handwriting. Boston Federal Trust, Box 342. The safe deposit box opened in my name without my knowledge. I pocketed the key and carefully restored the closet to its original state, then left the apartment as quietly as I'd entered, nodding to the doorman on my way out. Found everything you needed, Mrs. Mitchell? He asked. Yes, I replied truthfully. Exactly what I was looking for. The following morning, while David attended his bail hearing and my attorneys prepared for a meeting with federal prosecutors, I walked into Boston Federal Trust, wearing a conservative suit and a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I'd like to access my safe deposit box, I told the manager, presenting both the key and my driver's license. Box 342. She verified my identification against their records, then escorted me to the vault area. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. We haven't seen you here before. Your husband usually accesses this box." "Yes," I said smoothly. "He's unavailable today, and we need some important documents." In a private viewing room, I opened the box with hands that remained steady, despite my internal turmoil. Inside were several USB drives labeled by date, a stack of documents in a sealed envelope, and, most surprisingly, a small recording device. I examined everything carefully, taking photos of each item with my phone before removing the contents and placing them in my purse. Whatever David had been preserving as his insurance policy was now in my possession. 3 hours later, I sat in Diane Levinson's office as she and a team of forensic experts examined the contents of the safe deposit box. The USB drives contained backup financial records documenting the money laundering operation in meticulous detail, including evidence that David had indeed forged my signature on numerous documents. The papers included offshore account information, passwords, and contracts with shell companies. But it was the recording device that proved most valuable. It contained audio of multiple conversations between David and Richard Carter, discussing their arrangement in explicit terms, and clearly establishing that I had no knowledge of or involvement in their activities. This is... Diane paused, searching for the right word. Extraordinary. David created this extensive record as leverage against Carter, but it equally serves to exonerate you. It's as if he built his own prosecution and your defense simultaneously. "And we can use this?" I asked. Even though I obtained it unconventionally, Diane considered carefully. "The chain of custody is problematic, yes. But as your spouse with legal access to both the apartment and a safe deposit box in your name, you had reasonable right to retrieve these items. We'll present it to the prosecutors as evidence you discovered and voluntarily turned over." By that afternoon, my legal situation had transformed. The U.S. Attorney's Office, presented with the evidence from the safe deposit box, formally designated me as a cooperating witness rather than a subject of investigation. The restraining order against David was reinforced with additional provisions based on his arrest and the ongoing financial case. And most significantly, temporary full custody of Emma and Ethan was granted with no visitation rights for David pending resolution of the criminal charges. As I drove home that evening, physically and emotionally exhausted but lighter than I'd felt in weeks, my phone rang with a call from Martin Linden. "Sarah," he began without preamble, "I owe you an apology. We've been following the news about David's arrest, and it's clear the firm acted hastily in placing you on leave." "Yes," I agreed, not making it easier for him. "You did. The partners would like to meet with you next week to discuss your return, and to review the proposal you sent regarding expanded responsibilities. Your design work has always been exceptional, and frankly, we could use your perspective on several upcoming projects." I thought about the portfolio I'd recently rediscovered, the architectural ambitions I'd deferred for so long. "I appreciate that, Martin. Let me check my schedule and get back to you." As you can imagine, I'm juggling quite a few priorities at the moment. For the first time in our professional relationship, I didn't immediately accommodate his request, didn't express gratitude for the opportunity. Instead, I maintained my boundaries, my newly reclaimed sense of professional worth. The subtle shift in power wasn't lost on either of us. At home, I found Emma and Ethan in the kitchen with Jen, preparing dinner together, a domestic scene that felt both ordinary and precious after the chaos of recent days. "Mom!" Emma spotted me first, setting down the salad bowl she'd been filling. "We saw on the news about Dad's bail hearing. They said he had to surrender his passport." "Yes," I confirmed, setting my purse on the counter and washing my hands at the sink. "He's been released on bail, but with strict conditions. He's not allowed to contact us or leave the state. Does that mean we're safe?" she asked, the childlike question revealing the fear she'd been carrying. I dried my hands and embraced her. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe." Ethan, arranging chicken breasts on a baking sheet, looked up with his father's analytical gaze, but none of David's manipulation. "The news said something about a major break in the case today. Was that because of you?" I smiled at my perceptive son. "Partly. Let's just say I found some important information that helps clarify who knew what in this situation." Jen raised an eyebrow, clearly suspecting there was more to the story, but said nothing. Later, after dinner was cleared and the twins were upstairs finishing homework, She cornered me in the kitchen. "Spill it," she demanded, pouring us each a glass of wine. "What exactly did you do today?" I told her everything. The key from David's apartment, the safe deposit box contents, the recordings that had shifted the entire legal landscape. "Sarah Mitchell," she said when I finished, a mix of admiration and concern in her voice. "You badass, borderline criminal mastermind." I'm impressed and terrified simultaneously. I laughed, the sound surprising both of us. "It's amazing what you're capable of when everything's at stake." She clinked her glass against mine. "To the woman who's emerging from all this, I like her." "So do I realized, the truth of it settling comfortably around me. "So do I." 6 months after finding that hotel receipt with my name on it, I stood in the empty foyer of the Brookline house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The sale had closed that morning, a young family with 3 children excited about the neighborhood schools, the spacious yard, the potential for creating their own memories within these walls. I'd walked through one last time after they'd left, saying goodbye to the space that had contained 15 years of my life. The twins' height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the living room where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays, the sunroom where I'd rediscovered my passion for architecture among forgotten portfolios and abandoned dreams. Now, standing in the empty entryway, I felt neither sadness nor nostalgia, but a profound sense of completion. This chapter was ending exactly as it should, not with regret for what was lost, but with gratitude for what remained and anticipation for what lay ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Moving truck arrived at the new place. "Emma's already claiming the biggest bedroom. Hurry," I smiled, picturing the scene at our new condominium in Cambridge, a modern 3-bedroom overlooking the river, walking distance to Harvard Square, where the twins would start their senior year of high school in September. The space was half the size of our Brookline home, but felt twice as authentic, filled with only the possessions and memories we'd consciously chosen to bring forward. Outside, spring sunshine bathed the neighborhood in golden light. The same street where I'd once pushed a double stroller, where I'd taught the twins to ride bikes, where I'd believed my life would unfold according to a predictable blueprint. How little I had understood then about the true nature of plans, of foundations, of structural integrity. Some buildings I'd learned in architecture school appear sound until a significant event, an earthquake, a flood, reveals hidden weaknesses in their construction. My marriage had been such a structure, its flaws concealed beneath a perfect exterior, until the seismic revelation of David's betrayal exposed everything that had been compromised beneath. I locked the front door for the final time and placed the key in the lockbox for the new owners. In my car, I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. Shorter hair now with the gray strands left uncovered, minimal makeup, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. The woman who gazed back was simultaneously familiar and new. Sarah Mitchell, version 2.0. The legal aftermath of David's arrest had unfolded with surprising swiftness. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including the recordings from the safe deposit box, he had accepted a plea agreement, 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud and money laundering, with the possibility of reduced time for cooperation against larger players in the scheme. Richard and Elise Carter, with their early cooperation and substantial legal resources, had avoided prison entirely, accepting probation and significant financial penalties. The divorce was finalized 3 months after David's sentencing, the proceedings simplified by his incarceration and lack of leverage. The financial settlement was fair. The court recognized my innocence in the criminal activities and awarded me half the legitimate marital assets, plus support for the twins until they finished college. More meaningful than the financial resolution was the emotional one. Emma and Ethan had struggled with their father's disgrace. Initially angry, then confused, finally settling into a complicated grief for the relationship they'd lost and the man they'd thought they knew. They visited David monthly at the minimum security facility in Western Massachusetts where he was serving his sentence. Brief, awkward encounters that nonetheless provided necessary closure and the foundation for whatever relationship might be possible in the future. As for me, I had declined David's request to visit. There was nothing left to say that mattered, nothing to be gained from confrontation or reconciliation. The woman who had needed his approval, his direction, his definition of her place in the world, no longer existed. In her place stood someone entirely self-defined. Neither victim nor Victor, but simply herself. I drove toward Cambridge, where my new life was literally taking shape. Beyond the personal transformation of the past months, my professional reinvention had been equally profound. After declining Martin Linden's offer to return to my previous position, I had instead accepted a partnership at a smaller, female-led firm specializing in sustainable urban housing. The role demanded more hours, but offered creative control I'd never experienced at Linden & Brooke, plus the satisfaction of designing spaces that served real community needs rather than simply wealthy clients' vanity projects. At a stoplight, I checked my calendar. Dinner with Jen tonight to celebrate the move, a breakfast meeting tomorrow with potential investors for a mixed-income housing development I'd designed, and next week, my first date in 17 years. Nothing serious, just coffee with a literature professor Emma's English teacher had introduced me to at a school fundraiser. Whether it led anywhere or not was less important than the simple fact that I was open to the possibility, not to replace what I'd lost, but to discover what I'd never allowed myself to experience. The light changed, and I accelerated toward the river, toward Cambridge, toward the twins waiting at our new home. The future stretched before me, not the prescribed path I'd once followed, but a design of my own creation, with space for improvisation, for error, for growth. I had learned, painfully but irrevocably, that safety didn't come from external structures, marriages, houses, financial arrangements, but from internal foundations solid enough to withstand whatever earthquakes might come. "Mom! Finally!" Emma called, as I pulled into the parking space beneath our new building. She bounded toward the car, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her face flushed with excitement. "Ethan's being impossible about the bedroom situation, and the internet installer is asking questions I can't answer. The moving crew put your desk by the wrong window," Ethan added, appearing behind her with his debate team precision. "The light's all wrong for working, and someone needs to sign for the appliance delivery." I stepped out of the car, embracing them both despite their teenage protests. These beautiful, resilient children, no longer children really, who had weathered the past months with grace that humbled me, who had, in their own ways, found strength I hadn't known they possessed. "One thing at a time," I assured them, walking toward the building that would become our home. "We'll figure it out together." And we would. Not perfectly, not without challenges or missteps, but together, the three of us creating something new from the foundations we'd salvaged and the wisdom we'd earned. Later that evening, after the most pressing logistical disasters had been managed, and the twins were arranging their rooms to their exacting specifications, I stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the Charles River. The spring air carried the promise of renewal, of growth, of possibilities I was only beginning to imagine. 6 months ago, a hotel receipt with my name had shattered the illusion of the life I'd believed I was living. In the aftermath, I'd discovered something unexpected, not just betrayal and deception, but my own capacity for resilience, for reinvention, for authentic joy. I thought of all the women who remained trapped in beautiful prisons of others' design, compromising their dreams, doubting their perceptions, diminishing their light to accommodate someone else's comfort. I thought of the Sarah I had been, the accommodating wife, the background mother, the part-time professional, and felt compassion for her, rather than regret or shame. She had done the best she could with the understanding she had, but the woman standing on this balcony, watching the last light of day shimmer on the river's surface, knew better now, knew that true security came not from external validation, but from internal clarity, not from hiding behind someone else's expertise, but from claiming your own knowledge, not from avoiding conflict, but from confronting necessary truths, however uncomfortable. "Mom?" Emma's voice came from behind me. "Can we order pizza? The kitchen's still a disaster zone." I turned to find both twins in the doorway, their expressions expectant, trusting. "Pizza sounds perfect," I agreed. "Why don't you find the menus in that box we marked First Night Essentials?" As they disappeared back inside, I took one last look at the river, at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, and there would be many, I would face them as myself. Not as David Mitchell's ex-wife, not as Emma and Ethan's mother, not as a partner at an architecture firm, though I was all those things too. But first and fundamentally, I was Sarah Mitchell, architect of spaces, of relationships, of a life redesigned according to blueprints of my own creation, and the structure I was building now, day by day, choice by choice, had the strongest foundation I'd ever known, the truth of who I really was at last.